Welcome to the Love Pod, where inspiration, vision, and real connection come alive. Wherever you are, you belong here.
Welcome to the Love Pod, everyone. I'm so happy to invite you all to another wonderful conversation. This is our second podcast today. It's just one of those beautiful days where I get to connect with some wonderful souls. And we are joined with our special guest, Susan Lyons, who is a past life regressionist, who is a clinically trained hypnotherapist. And you really have such a beautiful energy, Susan. We just had in the brief time we met, talking about this time of awakening that we're in and this expansion of consciousness that's going on in our planet. I'm really thrilled to dive in and just talk about, some of these topics that people are starting to awaken to and wonder like, whoa, is reincarnation real? Have I had past lives? Do I have multidimensional aspects of myself? And I hear you're like a multifaceted practitioner in various areas and healing and stuff. So really looking forward to diving in. Do you want to just introduce yourself and tell our guests more about you and really what is your why and what's bringing you here today?
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. So my specialty is past life regression, and it's the purpose I got into this work for because I felt very passionate about reincarnation and past life regression. Um, and I was interestingly introduced to this work by my grandfather, who was
Mm.
also a hypnotherapist and a psychologist back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he also had an interest in past life regression, but he got into it because he wanted to debunk it. He thought it was
Oh,
baloney.
interesting.
But the more and more he started working with people, he discovered that they're telling the similar stories about how they came into this world and how they leave this
Mm.
world. And so he proved himself incorrect,
It sounds a lot
basically.
like the book Many Lives, Many Masters.
Yes,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
wonderful. So real pioneer, and
Yeah.
one of the things I love about this field is there is a lot of scientific evidence. So many people. I mean, there's the documentation is pretty undeniable at this point, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, for sure. And that was actually one of his things. He approached it more scientifically and he wanted to validate facts, and he was actually able to do some of that.
Wow.
So, not knowing I would ever be doing any of this, when he passed away, I asked for all of his material.
Oh,
And
wow.
it sat with me for years and years until one day I was at a crossroads in my life and I was sitting on my back porch and I literally was talking to my guides and I was saying, you know what? I know that I'm supposed to be doing something else. And I know I have a purpose and I know it's around helping people.
Mm,
And literally the words hypnotherapy spelled themselves out to me.
wow.
And so I started going through that material and interestingly found a school that was not even 10 minutes away from my
Mhm.
house.
Oh,
And
yeah. That's
yeah,
convenient.
yeah, very convenient and very synchronistic also, right?
Yeah.
And then I went to the open house at that school and I walked in there and I said, "Oh my goodness, I'm home. Like I
Mm,
belong here. These are my people." And so that's kind of what launched my interest into this work. And again, I got into it because of the past life regression, and that's opened so many other doors, like you said, we are multifaceted, and there's so many places we can go with this work. And I have seen it change. I've been doing this for over a decade, and I have seen it change and evolve and expand so much. Even more recently with the types of people that are exploring this work.
mm.
So that points to what you were saying about an awakening that's happening amongst us. And so I think it's really important to be able to talk about these things
Mhm.
openly and to have spaces that we can do that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I probably, what people call an old soul. I was asking very deep questions from a young age and very
Mm.
aware. And I have memories from being a very, very young baby. And we'll get into it. I've had some remembrances of other times as well. But I have noticed a huge shift, just to echo what you're saying. People of all walks of life. I noticed a lot of people in like corporate worlds and stuff are starting to question things. So like the question of meaning, and I don't know if it's the driver is that all these emergent technologies that are threatening people's normal sense of normalcy, like people are wondering like what am I going to do when I can't drive any longer, and it's like automated cars or like all the conversation, people are starting to wonder, like, I think the question of purpose and meaning is on the forefront of people's minds. And, you know, we've such, I mean, the technological acceleration on our planet is pretty phenomenal. I mean, I was playing like NES when I was a kid and had like a DOS computer, and I didn't really even have a real computer, I say, till like grade 11. And now like children are coming into a world with AI and blockchain and VR, and like it's so easy to be, and I've been saying on the show for a while, like it's so important that we raise our spiritual maturity, our level of consciousness on the planet to meet these changing times. And I think this inner work is so essential, Susan. So thank you for being for continuing your grandfather's work and being a light in the space. It's so important.
Thank you so much. Yes, it is. I love it. I love it so much. Yeah.
So, what is your favorite thing about this work? Is it like I had a friend, Alan Green, who does this, and he did a few sessions with Julie and I thought, wow, this is the most fascinating. He has the most fascinating job I can imagine because you hear about so many diverse experiences, not only earthly, but like we're talking cosmic stuff
Yeah.
here. So,
Yeah. I want to say the favorite thing about this work for me is I love hearing people's stories, and they go beyond just what's happening right now in our
mm,
present moment. A lot of the stories that go back to these past lives and belief systems and energy that we carry and our consciousness that carries on from these other lives. I'll even call it other lives now because of quantum physics. And
mm,
I think it really is all happening at the same time.
yeah,
And we're literally like tuning into just a different radio station when we're having these experiences. So
mm,
I love hearing people's stories, and I love seeing the moment where the aha comes and that switch happens, and the level of understanding in the heart, not really in the brain, like
yeah,
not on a mental level, but more heart centered on a soul level, that deep understanding or that connection that they make. Um, that opens them up to another aspect of themselves. I mean, that's why I call my website Discover Your True Self, because it's like,
yeah.
who are we really there on a soul level before all of the programming and the conditioning and the layers of things that have maybe happened over many lifetimes. So I love
Yeah.
hearing your
Well,
story.
you've inspired me. I'm going to be a little vulnerable here, kind of early on when I really didn't know anything. I mean, a lot of my direct spiritual experiences just happened from spending a lot of time in nature contemplating. So I wasn't exposed to like angels and fairies and all these ideas. And I question a lot of religions. I was always out of the box. I grew up in a very secular home, non-spiritual home, I would say. Like if anything, spirituality was nature and just, connecting in that way. But I had this experience when I was guided to study Indigenous wellness, and a lot of things happened before that, which maybe I can share as well. But
Mhm.
I, I was blown away by this experience. I went to see a Reiki practitioner. I know you're a Reiki practitioner as well, and I never heard like toning before, and I never really, I just was becoming introduced to like channeling. But I asked her, I had this wound on my, like I would run sometimes. I would just get this like sharp thing in my ankle. And so part of my question is like how things get locked in their physiology.
Mhm.
But she told me this wild thing. She said that I was a centaur in another life and I'd injured myself and I never was able to help to heal it. And I was like, okay. And then, I mean, I probably may have even dismissed that, but then she did this wild toning. And then I asked her this other question about a past life memory that I had from doing a Vipassana where I was looking at this Japanese man and woman making love. And I could tell I was not the man, but I was the woman. And I had this innate sense that I was somehow involved in the nuclear
Mm.
attack that had happened, and that was part of my life experience. And so, because I had a lot of fear around that when I was in my early years, she talked to, and I could feel it in my heart, Susan. She talked to in Japanese. This woman did not speak Japanese. She spoke in Japanese for like 3 minutes from the perspective of that man and gave it was like I could feel it healing my heart. And I was like, this is the wildest thing. And then at the end of the session, I drank the water that was in the room. And because she'd been doing all this toning, it was like it tasted like honey, but it was just water. It was just, it was really one of those experiences. I'm like, okay, this stuff, because it wasn't just inside of me. I'm now like connecting with another. So I feel like we sometimes need to meet someone like you in our journey to really give us credit, like to give us a reference point you know, that we're not just imagining some of these experiences we have, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What a great story. And I think a couple of things. Well, first of all, I do think that other energy modalities and other energy healing, like Reiki, even massage or acupuncture, can wake up some things in us and we start to have these sensations and realizations that there's something more that's going on. But I truly believe that our higher self guides us into those experiences. So your higher self led you to that experience with this person, and that may have even been planned before you were born. I
Interesting.
really believe we travel in soul groups, and
Hmm.
there's a whole setup that's happening before we even incarnate here. Like we have
And
a
I do
life plan.
I,
Yeah.
I do feel like there's a lot of soul families gathering. When Julie and I went out west, we read with the question of like, what's conscious community and how can we contribute to building bridges between conscious communities? And I really think like the whole lockdowns and all the COVID stuff, whatever is the truth behind it, I think people have all kinds of opinions about that. But it really did what it did is it shook things up in our society, and conscious people started finding one another because the people who were asking questions, people who are a little bit more, you know, discerning. And so what has been your experience in this like time of accelerated growth? Like what's your story, Susan, in finding your soul family?
Well, I think that it was definitely connected to my grandfather and that realization that I had that day for hypnotherapy that led me to the school. I mean, that is my soul family. That the school, I actually still teach. I teach at that school now.
Oh, that's
It's called,
beautiful.
yes, HCH Institute, and it's in the Bay Area, Northern California. It's
Okay.
all online now. But that led me to my soul family, and that awoke something in me to the understanding that there is a soul family. And also, I have to say this so I don't forget today. The one thing I want everybody to know is that we have a lot of help energetically, and we
Mhm.
forget to ask. And so sometimes opening up to that simple question of like, what is my purpose? What am I
Mhm.
here to do? Asking our guides to lead us to our purpose. And lead us to our soul group. And sometimes it's just as simple as asking the question,
Mhm.
and we're ask and you shall receive, right? And
Yeah.
so, yeah, my experience of my soul family, and I knew it on a very heart-centered soul level the day I walked into that school. And that's why
Yeah.
I've never left, because that is my family. Yeah.
That feeling of being belonging and being at home, so
Yeah.
important. And thank you for that reminder. I think we all need to hear that. You know, so many of us have been indoctrinated into systems where we're taught to be self-reliant and to really use self-will to cause things to manifest and to achieve. And that is one way of brute forcing our way through life. But remembering that we do have guides, that we have an infinite source of energy and intelligence that can lead us is such an important, but we have to ask, right? Is there a way that you think, I mean, what has been your experience in working with so many people and uncovering this? Like, is there everyone has their own way maybe of asking, but are there particular tools that you find are useful, like journaling or meditation, or what do you find really helps with that asking process and receiving?
Yeah. It could be a simple, quiet moment where we're still enough to be listening internally. It could be a 5 minute moment, even. I also love journaling, and I love journaling with even having a quiet moment. Maybe you call it a 5 minute meditation, maybe it's longer, but connecting with the energy of our higher self and our guides in that moment, and maybe asking a question and then journaling the answer to the question. And
Mm,
just, I think a lot of it is being able to be in the present moment and step out of the chaos of everything that's happening, to be quiet and internal so that we have an opportunity to listen.
mm,
I think we're so distracted by so much going on around us. It pulls us out of our heart space. And I think you mentioned, the pandemic, and I think that's why a lot of things shifted during that time, because we actually had that quiet space where
mhm,
we weren't rushing around and being pulled in so many directions. So for me, the simple practice is to connect to our higher self And for some people, that might be a visual that they have in their mind. For some
Mhm.
people, it might be more of a feeling. But one thing I love to recommend to people is if it's a feeling for you and you kind of want to take it one step further, you could also like kind of feel into if that was a visual, what would that look like?
Mm.
And so for some people, it might be a color or a light. Um, it might be an orb. For some
Mhm.
people, it might actually look like a human figure. But
Mm.
to connect with that part of ourselves, that wise and creative part of ourselves that is our full potential, really will. And again, when we have that dialogue and when we're asking, and also our guides and our angels, we get the breadcrumbs that lead us in the direction that our purpose is if we are, have the moment to ask and and listen and actually
Mm.
follow what we're being told, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, I think it's so important what you said too, because there's a lot of folks who, want to know like, what's my purpose? And they want to get the whole thing. It's like, here, you're going to do this, you're going to write books, you're going to be a speaker. Like, and really what you said about following the divine breadcrumbs, that's been very true in my journey. It's about taking the next step and trusting that more will be revealed as you trust those steps. And it is really, I think intentionally for the majority of souls who are awakening to remembrance of who they are, it's gradual because it can be very jarring to our lives if we all of a sudden flick on and we realize like, the situation we're in and how much maybe is out of alignment with true reality. So for a lot of us, it requires that those little steps. And I love what you say about those deepening questions, and asking good questions and then journaling, because I find journaling can you go deeper into the thought, right? You reflect a little bit more. So those are beautiful practices. Thank you for sharing those, Susan.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, remembering to ask the question, right? And you brought up a really good point about, I do see a lot of people that when that switch gets turned on, they're like their foot is on the gas pedal and they want to learn everything about all of this all at once.
Yeah.
And I want to say, take your time and be patient and be present because it is a lot of incoming energy and it can be overwhelming, right, for our energy system
Mhm.
and for our psyche. So be patient and take your time and trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. I think that one of the mistakes that we can make is, trying to force awakening, trying to kill the ego. Like the ego serves a very important role of functioning in our world. I mean, without it, we wouldn't have the impulse to basically take care of ourselves and survive until we have a strong enough, a sense of individuality beyond that need to do some of those things, right? So yeah, I think it's a really important reminder to just go with the flow, relax. If anything, I feel like the more that we do relax and allow love into our life, the more that grace can happen and we can be in a state of receivership, right? Like we are the children of Creator, and Creator takes care of all his other children, her other children, however you want to identify with it, its other children. Like it's inherently everywhere. It's all of our needs are provided. But as a
Yeah.
species, we've kind of, pinched ourselves off from that remembrance and that rejoicing. It reminds me, I just posted in our school community. Have you ever heard God's chorus of crickets?
No.
Oh my God.
Very
It
interesting.
I wish I could share the audio in here. I'm gonna have to figure out a way to do it one time for our audience. But if you basically, I'll tell you what it is they did just a simple recording of crickets. And the only thing they modified was they slowed it down so that a cricket's life would be the lifespan of a human being, so that whatever level that is, the multiple. And I gotta tell you, Susan, it will give you chills when you listen to it. The harmonies, the melodies, you can hear individual singers kind of going off, but they're also in tune. And it is a reflection of this rejoicing that's happening in creation all the time that we have somehow just turned our blinders to a little bit as a species. And I feel like that's what we're kind of doing. All of those who are here, who are gathering to be, the lights to way show like yourself, like we're helping kind of turn that dial a little bit back to remembering, right? That this is really a series of miracles. You're a miracle. I'm a miracle. Like life is miraculous. And let's invite that in more.
It is, I really do agree with you that it is a remembering. Um, and also, as human beings, that left brain part of us, the ego that we do need, that's the part that wants everything to happen right now.
Mm,
Like on the spirit side, there is no time. And
mm.
so we do have to take a pause and be still and let the process happen and trust it to unfold in the time and form that it's supposed to, right? We feel so rushed. And there's that whole other part of us that we can tap into when we're quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a huge proponent of meditation. It's a regular practice for me. I can't I never counted, but I've spent thousands of hours in
Mm.
meditation, and I just feel like it's sometimes, I mean, just in the middle of the day I'll meditate even just for 10 minutes sometimes, and I feel like it can refresh me. Like I feel like I've been sleeping for 8 hours, and it is because that in the stillness, in the silence, that's the equilibrium where the loving intelligence meets us, right? But we have to go and meet it. It can't, it's, this is the one thing I've realized about love. It will never impose itself on us, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
true. That, wow.
So would you like to hear a little bit of my early journey and my first past
Yes,
life remembrances? Because it was a little
absolutely.
jarring for me, I got to tell you.
Mm.
And it really changed the course of my whole life. And it's taken about almost 2 decades for me to really start talking more publicly. I felt more comfortable, telling people one on one. Like I would have never talked about like the centaur stuff. And even like I'm sure some people would like, oh, I'm not going to listen to that guy anymore. He's a little too out there. But I think when we think of ourselves as consciousness first, and we think of the creative power of the loving intelligence that is infinite possibilities, it makes more sense. Like consciousness is eternal, it's infinite. So why couldn't we experience infinite forms of expression? Why would we be limited to one kind of form of creation, and then you get one shot and you better do it good or else it's so illogical, right? If we really peel back the layers of these belief systems that have been imposed on us. Um, so if you like to hear it,
I love hearing
okay.
people's
All
stories.
right, sure.
Actually.
So I like I said, I spend a lot of time contemplating. I was always some form of philosopher, and I spent a lot of time in nature, but I never really was exposed to meditation other than I had a lot of migraines when I was very young from the Chinooks, the weather pattern changes that would happen and change the pressure dynamics from the Rocky Mountains, and I would go into extreme migraines when I was
Mm.
young. Like sometimes I'd have three or four every week.
Wow.
And I learned to kind of go into the stillness. I think that was my first real time. But around 18, 19 years old, after high school and stuff, I was working, and there was this woman that I was working with, and she told me she just got back from this meditation retreat, and her eyes, like the cellulas of her eyes were like this, and she's like, Nathaniel, you should go to, and I'm like, well, clearly you've had experience here, so and you seem, in a pretty elevated state of consciousness. So I'm interested. So it was a 10-day silent retreat. You've probably heard of it, Vipassana, right? And this was my first like formal introduction. I go there, I didn't know what to expect, and was very intellectual at the time, I would say as well. And here we're introduced one of the techniques that Buddha had taught. And Vipassana translates to insight, right? So this technique where we basically scan the body of sensations and develop the quality of equanimity without, so we're looking at all the subtle sensations of the body without judging them. And because Buddha recognized that we're always judging, like, and either creating craving or aversion, that's what causes suffering. So you're learning to I kind of undo and train the mind. But
Mm.
in doing this, all these emotions and patterns come up. And in one case, I think it was like day 6 or 7, one of my energy centers, actually a couple of them, I just felt them like unwind, whoosh, spiral out, and I went in through a tunnel and I saw worlds like with colors that I'd never imagined, like so much. It was like going through like like Doctor Strange, the vortex, and just like all these dimensions of reality. And then I came to a much more earth-based one, and I told you about the Japanese woman. And after that was one of the most poignant remembrances, and it brought me out of the meditation. After, and I saw the procession, and I saw all these robed figures kind of leading to this, and then I was in the crowd, and I was witnessing the crucifixion of Yeshua. And I had a very personal feeling to this. Like I had anger, I had a feeling of guilt, I had a feeling like that I needed to stand up and yell that this was so wrong. How could we do this to this wonderful teacher of love who only demonstrated love? And uh, I came out of that meditation, and I was traumatized because it's a silent meditation. So there was assistant teachers, but it was such a weird experience. And I knew they would just tell me, just focus on the meditation, ignore the visions, they don't mean anything. But to me, it meant something. And I also, because I was contemplating quantum physics so much, and what you said about, time and everything, I thought I actually had an opportunity to go back in time and change the timeline to actually prevent the crucifixion. And I was really putting a lot of pressure on myself. And that somehow, like, can you imagine having a master like him on our planet, and teaching for forever, and only years later, in meeting Julia, because I wondered, like, why did that happen? I went to different churches because I'm not religious, not spiritual. Well, I guess I was becoming spiritual at that point, and nothing ever resonated with me. I've always kind of felt like I don't like being here. What they're saying, it doesn't resonate with me. And then fast forward a couple of years, and I was spending a lot more time in the forest contemplating the nature of light. And in doing that, I was inspired one day. I was looking at patterns in a leaf, and I was contemplating a leaf, and I said, this comes from a tree that comes from a seed. And a seed is just this small little thing, and it makes this enormous tree. And then all these seeds come from this tree. It's like it's infinite, it's so abundant. And this inspired question came of, what would our world look like if we all truly did what we really love to do, and we lived in abundance, and we just shared all the abundance of the world? And after that moment, I stood back up and I started walking home, and a being of light I could see in the distance. And it was in my vision, but also in between. It was a multidimensional experience. And then all of a sudden, that being was like halfway, like teleported. And then all of a sudden, again, right in front of me. And it was all the ineffable colors that beyond anything I'd ever imagined. It was pure light, no discernible facial features, just pure being of light. However, I was clearly aware that this being had a much transcendent experience of consciousness, but the feeling was just of pure equality, and it was pure brotherly love. And I knew that it was Christ. And I didn't tell anybody about that experience for the first little while. I didn't know what to think of it. I never saw him leave. I just kind of came back to more of a regular awareness and continued on my path, kind of in a little bit of like, okay. And then, when I did reveal myself to some family members, I wasn't thoroughly accepted, let's say. I'm being very kind. Um, and then in meeting Julia, like, I felt that experience led me to a lot of more journeying and asking questions, and eventually led me to study Indigenous wellness. Met so many elders, so many teachings, and I realized there's these interconnective teachings. And as I was helping some Indigenous seniors, leading a seniors group, I felt impulse to go to a bookstore, and I found this book called Christ Returns Reveals Startling Truth. And I wasn't expecting to find this. I was looking for one of Neil Donald Walsh's books. And these were a series of letters that actually were coming from Christ, that were written through a woman. There was no author attributed other than him, and she was known as the recorder. And in them, he answered all these questions that I had about who was he really, and why did he, like, what was his real teachings, and why was he killed? And he answered everything, and he outlined a path to how we can all become spiritually enlightened. Anyways, I still didn't know who I was to him in that relationship. It was all a mystery. And then I met Julia. I met one of her spiritual teachers who recognized me and guided me, didn't tell me, and just guided me, lit some incense. We did a little meditation, and I saw more images of myself, and that I was one of his sisters in that lifetime, and I cared very much about his work and his mission, and I saw myself in other lifetimes, yeah, continuing that work and in the ways that I could. And now here we are, and I feel like we're at a time of world enlightenment, and that's what the letters call forth for us to gather from all traditions, Buddhists and Taoists and atheists even and scientists, and like look at how our consciousness is, you know, is affecting our relationships, our weather patterns, the buildings we live in. It's all a reflection of our internal consciousness. So master that, choose heaven first as the state of unconditional love. And so that's what has been leading me, and then becoming a father and catching my daughter. And I know I had memories. Yeah, anyways, I've talked a lot, but I think this is one of the key elements, because the other thing I just want to end here is in letter nine, where he wraps up everything, Susan, he talks about reincarnation. And he says, not only is it a fact of existence that we're all psychic, but reincarnation is a fact of existence as well. And I feel like this is such an important thing for the West, especially, to really embrace that we are part of this larger tapestry. It can remove racism. It can remove these things that separate us and can make us feel like we're, these isolated individual selves. So, anyways, that's my part of my story I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, the book, the fact that you found that book when you were looking for something else. I like to talk about this sometimes when I have clients, that when they come to session, I usually have a consultation with the client, and the work begins there before they ever even come to the session.
Mm,
Something is being orchestrated already, right?
mm,
And then we have the session, and sometimes people come out of it and was like, well, what if I was making it up? Kind of, that critical mind kicks in. But I remind clients, or I let them know, and this goes to what you were just saying, is oftentimes we get validating facts later on that validate those experiences. And
mm,
that to me those things are really key to letting us know like we are on the right path. Again, it's like another part of that breadcrumb, right?
mm.
That you're following your some knowing or remembering in your soul, and you're being led. And so the validation that you got from that, I think, is really beautiful. I love it. We're
Thank you for
grateful.
reflecting that. No, I appreciate that. For our listeners who maybe, I mean, they might have left if we're this far into this conversation with all the things we've already talked about. But what is, in your perspective, hypnotherapy? And because maybe some people are like a little like afraid of that, or they've been shown like the shows where people are doing funny things, and how, because I feel like it's a very important practice. I've seen more emergence of it, more people are seeking it. Can you talk about your perspective of it and why it's so important?
Yeah, I think the practice of hypnotherapy, which we use those techniques in past life regression and some of the other deeper spiritual dives that I love to do, we are essentially getting ourselves out of our critical, egoic left brain thinking. So we are only using about 10% of our mind. We have a whole 90% that we have access to that is more heart-centered.
Mm,
And that's where I think all of the beauty and the truth is. So it helps us to get out of that part of our thinking mind, so that we can access those other spaces. And, this is not stage hypnotherapy.
yeah.
Everybody's probably seen the people at high school and college graduations. We're doing this in the scope of healing, and we're not doing something as practitioners, hypnotherapy practitioners, we're not doing something to the client.
Hmm.
The client is meeting us halfway. So the job of a hypnotherapist is to hold the container and the safe space so that the client can meet halfway, and it's about the client's experience. We are not projecting our ideas or our thoughts or our story of what we think their past life might have been based on whatever challenges they're having in their life at the present moment. So we leave it open. And as the hypnotherapist, it's important to get out of our own way, right? And
Mm,
just allow spirit to move through us. So it's not me as the personality in the session. I'm me as the personality is standing out of the way,
mm,
so that the truth, can come through for the client. And and when the client can also allow, right? And
Mm,
trust, and that's very important that the client trusts the safe container,
yeah.
so that they can really take that deep dive and really open up all of those little those deep places within, and feel like they can trust the experience instead of coming out of it with more questions.
Mm,
um, Oftentimes people will come out, they'll say, well, how am I going to feel afterwards? And the one word I can point to that is contemplative.
mm, mm. Such
So
an
it
important
opens up,
word.
yeah, it opens up a lot of doorways to our expansiveness, within our consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And one thing in particular that you said I think is really profound and important. And I feel like in this day and age where, like especially a lot of like plant medicine journeying has become popular, and there are a lot of, let's say marketers who are seeing opportunity for money making in these spaces. The practitioner that we feel guided to is so important because they need to be doing their inner work. Like the healer needs to be on that journey at a certain point, if not in their growth and in their spiritual expansion. And I think that that's so important. What you talk about, like being able to hold that space it is a sacred container that you're opening and allowing someone to tap into themselves in a way that maybe it, wouldn't be well received in their normal social, surroundings. So, can you talk a little bit of like once people start on this journey and start going into that contemplative mode, it can be a little, it can affect the life. Maybe someone realizes they're not in their right.
Mhm.
Their dharma, they need to choose a different career path, or they're in a relationship that maybe is tied to past life, that there was ties that were not healthy and now it's repeated or something. I'm interested in more of the integrative part of it, because I feel like that's a big part of the piece, the puzzle
Yeah.
piece. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, th sometimes people come for, I'm really curious about past life regression, and maybe there's a particular subject matter, like maybe it's a phobia or something, right? Um, and people can come from one session, but oftentimes I think it's important to continue to do the work and to follow those breadcrumbs. And it's really important to have that integrative space. I call them one-hit wonders. Like somebody comes and they have like a transformative experience, but then what do I do with that? Where do I go next?
Mm,
So it's important to continue the dialogue and have a place for that. That might be a group of friends. It might be a support system. It might be, I mean, maybe a Reiki meetup group, or places where we can discuss and talk about these things with others, and feel comfortable to be seen.
mm,
Um, eh, Also, during a past life regression, one of the most important things is experiencing what happens after the death experience. That's a major part of the integration process. It's really important that that happens in any past life regression.
mm,
And I think there's different techniques out there, and
mm,
some I'm not sure if all of them hold that as tenderly as it should be held,
mm.
because that's where we bring in the perspective of the higher self, where we can reframe what happened
Okay.
and what is the lesson, and what is the positive message we can take out of that experience, and how do we reframe it to make it useful in our life. But continuing the dialogue, right,
Mm,
with places that feel safe, I think is really important for the integration process in any kind of this spiritual work, whatever modality you're using. And I think it's also very, very important to have somebody that's properly trained to hold space.
yeah.
You kind of alluded to that. I'm also on the board of directors for the International Board for Regression Therapy,
Okay.
and that is credentialing people and board certifying people with other levels of looking at their other levels of training, so that it gives clients actually a place to go also to look for, the people that have been trained, and had extensive training, because there are some, unfortunately, there's some hypnotherapy classes and even past life classes that are like a weekend long.
Mm, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying you couldn't do it. Maybe there's something that innate in you that really you can hold the space, and there are those people, but I do think it's important for the container to be held well, and for the conversation about what opens up in this to
Mm.
continue.
Well, even if someone has a natural ability, it's just like any professional. You want to continue to train and build new skills, and because you never know, what you're going to encounter. If someone has like a panic attack or something, you need to have be prepared for that because it can be, like I said, like my own experience was quite jarring. It definitely changed my trajectory. It made me question because I was very much, I'd always loved the creative arts and stuff, but science was really interesting to me, and mathematics. And I'm really grateful now that we have this emergent language where we can talk about spirituality and mysticism and things through a language of science, and there's these inspired scientists who are coming and talking from now more of a Western perspective. I mean, like the Eastern sciences have been there for a long time, and there's deep, deep, deep knowledge that's been, part of those cultures. But for some of us, we haven't had access to that. So I really appreciate that there is, that kind of container for the practitioners to go and deepen their practice and to create trust. And it's just more and more layers of what I would say is community. Like we need those places where you said something really important. We need to be seen. We all need to be heard. We need to be seen. And I think we're leaving a time where you know, there was this propensity to teach people to do things in isolation. And I don't know if it's the education indoctrination or whatever. It's like sit at your desk, do your own work, don't look at another. And then, and now I feel like the times are changing, paradigms are shifting, and it's like we're realizing how interconnected we really are, not only with just one another, but with the planet as a whole. Can you talk a little bit about I'm curious about a lot of things, but your family, because your grandfather was, deep into hypnotherapy. How was it growing up in a family that had this kind of saw this transformation in your grandfather going from a skeptic to now this person's believer? How was that? How did that influence the dynamics of how you grew up, Susan?
Unfortunately, I didn't live super close to him, so I
Okay.
didn't have as much access as I wanted to him. But I can speak to what's really interesting is he was also a businessman, so he was
Okay.
very distinguished looking, and because he came from it from a scientific perspective, people didn't call him so woo-woo. So
Hmm.
the way he presented himself was actually perfect for the time because I mean 50s, 60s, and 70s, there could
Yeah.
be a lot of woo-woo stuff, right?
Yeah.
And he actually did a lot of talks and spoke, and I have a ton of newspaper articles of him speaking in churches and church gatherings and stuff. And he wasn't also somebody who is, I would call religious. So I wouldn't say that religion was a big part of my family.
Mm.
And interestingly, my dad's an atheist. So, I mean, and that's my grandfather's son.
Mm.
But when I look at my grandfather's material, it goes way beyond it goes way beyond just scientific.
Mm.
You know, a- and it's interesting that he did come from the perspective of wanting to validate information. And my mother is also very spiritual. So she was connected with the Unity Church for many, many years and
Okay.
actually worked for them. So I had that influence. And I don't know. I also think I was just born as a very sensitive, curious kid. And
Mm.
I kind of at a young age think that I just saw that there was something beyond just what we were being told in our everyday, regular material world.
Mm.
Um, so I think that had an influence on me as well. And when you were speaking about, the belonging, right? We all need the belonging. And for those of us that have had these that are more sensitive or have had these mystical experiences, it can feel isolating
Mm.
when nobody else is talking about this. So I think the
Mm.
belonging part is really, really important.
Yeah, it's so important. And I appreciate you bringing up the Unity Church. It remind me of my friend who passed, unfortunately, a few years ago. Like to call himself the Reverend Dwight Smith, who was also involved with the Unity Church, and he taught the Christ letters and stuff through the Unity Church in Richmond, Virginia. And he
Mhm.
was also a student of like Ernest Holmes' Science of Mind and stuff. And so a lot of these things we're seeing kind of come together, and bridges are being built. So I love that your grandfather was a pioneer in that. And I think it's just so needed, right? Because there's so many. We live in a society, at least I grew up, where we don't talk a lot about feelings. We don't talk a lot about spiritual experience is not something, I mean, I'm more used to it because I was in indigenous circles for a while and I talked to a lot of elders, so I just got more used to being open. But I feel like we all, I mean, the way I see it, Susan, we're all spiritual beings having a spiritual experience. It's being human, but what would you say to people who are, maybe they've started this journey now. They're starting to have these remembrances, and they're looking for that family. And maybe now that they have it, like, how do you think we can actively continue the expansion and building bridges between these spaces? I feel like there's some of us who have this like world vision now, and how do you see this unfolding?
Yeah. I would say to continue to be curious and continue to ask questions and continue to do your own inner work on whatever level feels right and comfortable for you. And what I'm seeing, and this is one of the things I tell my clients, I tell them, thank you for being brave enough to do this work,
Mm,
because there is a ripple out effect that's happening for every person that steps forward. The whole 100 monkey effect, right? As it starts to ripple out and touch other areas of our community. So to continue to talk about this, when you see somebody that's struggling or that you can support that might be going through mystical or spiritual experiences, to be able to be open-minded and welcoming to that person in those conversations.
mm,
And for anybody that's on this journey, I think it's important to find your tribe.
mhm.
Again, I probably said this already a couple times during this conversation, but I think it's really, really important,
Yeah.
because some people are confused about these things and they think, am I going crazy? Nobody else
Yeah.
is having these experiences, but so many people are.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I mean there can be repercussions if people don't access the knowledge that they need. Like I've heard of like people forcing Kundalini experiences and then that energy getting stuck in their heart, or people who have they're more sensitively attuned and they can see and they can hear things that are maybe multidimensional, and yet they're diagnosed and not learned how to cultivate those gifts, and then they're medicated, and that can lead to other problems. So I believe that you've reminded us several times, like asking is really important, and then finding our connection, our place of belonging, our community, our tribe, however that comes. On that note, Susan, because I've also seen a preponderance, and Christ warns about this in the letters, is like to be very mindful that there are cults out there. There are people who are taking advantage of people who are awakening, and we mentioned like people going in medicine retreats and having like two practitioners and 50 people doing ayahuasca together, and that can, like, some people don't come back from these experiences. So, can you talk a little bit about discernment from your perspective? I think this is an important conversation.
I think it's a really important conversation, and it's important to have discernment, because there's a lot of people that are doing really wonderful and beautiful work, and there's a lot of people that maybe aren't well trained, and they see this more as an occupation, right? Except instead of coming from the heart.
Hmm.
So I think it's important, again, to be silent enough and to tune in. Every single one of us has an intuition, right? We all have an inner compass, and to follow that. And if something doesn't feel right, to ask questions, to explore, again, continue to remain curious. But we have to listen from the heart instead of just from the head. It's like, how does this feel in my body, right?
Mm,
So that inner dialogue, and this is brings up another important thing, I think, especially in the West, we're all told if you see it, you believe it.
mm,
We're not told to trust our inner knowing. And
yeah.
so that's a skill and that's a muscle that also we need to develop.
Mm,
Because I can tell you so many times I've ignored my intuition, and boy, did I get a good lesson. So I don't doubt it anymore. I follow what I feel.
mm,
And so take it into your heart and see how it feels in your heart and in your body,
mm,
and throw out what doesn't feel right for you. And
yeah.
I even tell clients, like, I give you some ideas and we might have a discussion about something, and if it feels right for you, great, and if it doesn't, discard it. Like,
Mm,
practice that discernment, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Is a skill. It is
Yeah,
a
it's a skill and we got to practice it. I think it's so important. I mean, really wonderful. I really appreciate who you are. You bring such a lovely, grounded and balanced perspective to this work. And you mentioned a word I hear so much. It's funny. I never really heard it before, but I'm hearing so many people use the term woo woo. And on a funny note, Susan, I think I was on a call with someone. Maybe they were even on the show. I can't recall now, but they were talking about gratitude being woo woo. Like, and they were like, I'm like, wow, it's like some people's, it's like our tolerance for like if you think being grateful is woo woo and that's not going to have a health benefit, I feel like wow, some of the things I've contemplated. So can you maybe, I think this ties into the discernment piece is like where like going within obviously is important, but there's also so much information coming at us. Maybe it is community. Like I think you've already probably answered these questions, but can you maybe talk a little bit about the woo-woo and how to really kind of stay grounded in these times where there can be more energetic turbulence?
Yeah, yeah. The woo-woo word, like, oh my God, somebody said gratitude is woo-woo. That is so wow. I mean, the fastest way to raise your vibration, I feel compelled to say this, is gratitude.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, and in those moments when we are connecting with our guides and we are asking and we are listening for the message that comes back, the quickest way to get us there is to be in the gratitude. That can be even part of a meditation practice, right?
yeah,
Um, but yes, it's very important to stay grounded, I think. One of the ways I love to do that is spend a lot of time in nature.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So really stay grounded and you know these mystical and spiritual knowings and practices and as we start waking up, it can be very easy to get kind of carried away and kind of float off into you know that those other places can be oh so soft and so beautiful.
Mhm.
But I remember having a conversation with myself one day and reminding myself that I chose to be here in this human body and I chose this experience so to be in the present moment with it and to be interacting with it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I would say the quickest way to ground yourself is nature and hey, hug a tree,
Yeah. It's
right?
so I was gifted this gift one day by a young man. As said his grandfather, he was I forget his nation, but he told me, if you have problems, one way of doing that is literally going and putting your head on a tree because it's like an antenna. And you ask it to remove that and just dissipate it, through the leaves and the roots. And I thought that was a wonderful practice because when we do touch trees, we are grounding. And
Yes.
when we approach sometimes, I think we make the spiritual remove from where we are here, but remembering that this is a spiritual dimension, like the tree people and the rock people, and everything is an expression of consciousness. And when we approach life from this sacredness, even approaching a tree and having a conversation, like that's a way of connecting with creation, which is a way of connecting with creator, and I feel like if we can live our life in that way and ground ourselves in this moment of, and like you said, being grateful. I mean, even if that's all we can achieve in a lifetime is just a consistent state of gratitude,
Yes.
what a beautiful life, right?
Yeah.
So
I
thank you for
love
that reminder.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, walk barefoot in the dirt or
Yes.
in the sand, right? Lay down on the grass, right? And gratitude, one of the things that I do, I say three things I'm grateful for every day before I put my feet on the ground.
Beautiful.
That's how I start my day.
That's beautiful. It's funny. I've been wearing this. I on our interview earlier, I did this too. But this necklace was a
Mhm.
gift from a healer that we met on Vancouver Island before we conceived. Actually, Julia had a pretty profound healing experience, and the woman said, "I don't know why, but I just have to give this to you, Julia. It's supposed to be with you." And I ended up while she was pregnant. Every morning, the first thing I would do is I'd use every single one of these beads, and one thing I was grateful for was my regular practice, and I've just been feeling moved to bring it more and more on the show. So this like to me this is always a reminder of the journey and how there's always so many things to be grateful for around us. But we do have to, like you said, take those pauses and really make space for that stillness to listen to that because it is so easy to get pulled into the busyness and the hustle and the bustle of the world if we're not practicing our discernment.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Susan, um, first, I'd love to invite you to let our audience know how they can find you, how they can connect with you, and continue on this searching for themselves. Would you let
Mhm.
us know that?
Yeah, so my website is Discover Your True Self, but the true is missing the E on purpose. So discover your TRU
Okay.
self.com.
Okay.
So that's my website. And also on my website there's a monthly group that I hold. This is a really great way for somebody to dip their toe in the water if they're interested in past life regression and actually in meeting a group of like-minded people. It's once a month on the first
Okay.
Wednesday of every month, and there's a different subject every month. And the information is on my website if people would like to join in for that. Yeah.
Okay, that's really wonderful. Thank you for that, Susan. And also, I'd love to invite you, if you ever feel moved, check out school. You're always welcome to our school community. But because we've
Love
talked so much about community
it.
and finding our tribe, a unique thing, I've never found a platform like school. I consider myself an unofficial school ambassador. I've been on there only since September. This is actually a Christmas gift, but there's no ads and it's all true authentic engagement that's on school, and people are, I feel like school's even reinventing what they call IRLs, in-person real life events. So
Mm.
schoolers are finding one another, and I've met a lot of people who would resonate with your work, who are in our community and also in the greater school ecosystem, and all the communities are interconnected. So one of the problems we want to solve through Lightheart Vision is to break the silos of, community creators and builders who are working in isolation and really start building conscious bridges. And for me, school has really inspired me to see that we can do this in a way on a platform that isn't, you know spamming us with all kinds of ads and things, and it's a unique place. So you're more than welcome to check that out. And I really I encourage our guests to listen to Susan's really timeless, wisdom of asking, our guides, that higher intelligence, and seeking our real community, our tribe. Like when we all feel like a sense of belonging, I think we're going to transform our world. And you've just reminded us that in so many ways during this conversation, Susan. So I want to thank you, and I also want to ask you, just before we go, I love asking guests this. If you had a megaphone and you could talk to everyone all at once and everyone could hear you, what would you say?
Mm. I guess it goes back to the stay curious about who you are on a soul level and don't forget to ask for help.
Mm.
Yeah.
So powerful, so poignant, and such a beautiful reminder. Thank you so much, Susan. Is there anything else you'd like to share before we invite our daughter, Luciana, to come and say thanks to everyone for watching?
Nothing else. I enjoyed this conversation so much. You have
Me
such a
too.
welcoming space. So thanks a lot for having me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the compliment, Susan. Blessings to you and all your loved ones and all those you touch and help with your beautiful work. So
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much.
All right. I'm going to invite Luciana here.
The moon is right, the spirit's up. We're here tonight, and that's enough. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. Simply having a wonderful Christmas time. The party's on, the feeling's here.
We wish you a
Happy New Year. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year! Can you say Merry Christmas, everybody?
Yeah.
Say it.
Happy New Year. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Love you.
I love you.
We wish you a